My chosen family are the people who make me happy, Grace declared, lifting her glass. Applause filled the room. Then she looked straight at me and said, "You may leave." I rose, shaking. Theodore stood as well, and what he did next stunned everyone. But first, let me take you back 3 hours, to how that moment came to be, and how it altered my life. I was finishing getting ready for my daughter's wedding. My wine-colored dress was perfectly pressed. At 67, I still wanted to make the right impression on Grace. The rose perfume on my wrists mixed with the smell of cooling coffee on the bedside table. I had managed only a piece of toast. My nerves wouldn't allow more. Today was the most important day of her life, and I wanted to be flawless. As I fastened the pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother, memories came. Nights spent nursing Grace through fevers. Stories read until she slept, working double shifts so she could attend the best university. I practiced my smile in the mirror and told myself, today everything will change. Today she will see me and value me. The phone rang. It was Victoria, my younger sister. "Amelia, how are you? Ready for the big day?" "More than ready," I answered, feeling tears rise. "I think today it will finally be different between Grace and me." Victoria was quiet for a moment. She knew our history. The cool phone calls. The fewer visits since Grace moved in with Theodore. "Take care of yourself," she said. "Don't expect too much." But I had already decided. Today would be our reconciliation. I packed the gift I'd been paying off for a year, a fine china set. Each piece was an apology. Each cup, a fresh start. I had even sold my wedding ring to finish paying for it. The taxi arrived at 2. On the way to the church I smiled, imagining the hug, the words, the forgiveness. The church was decorated with white and pale pink flowers, exactly what Grace had wanted. I arrived early to secure a front row seat, so she would see me. A wedding planner stopped me. "Those seats are reserved for immediate family. I am the mother of the bride," I said. He checked the list and frowned. "5th row, ma'am." My smile faded. I sat in the 5th row as if I were any guest, while the first pews filled with Theodore's friends, Grace's coworkers, people who had come into her life long after I had. When the music began, and my daughter walked down the aisle, radiant in white, my heart swelled with love and hope. Maybe this was a misunderstanding. Maybe at the reception things would be different. The ceremony was beautiful. Theodore seemed kind, and his gaze at Grace reassured me. At least she had found someone who loved her. After the ceremony, the room was full of congratulations and conversations. I managed a quick kiss on Grace's cheek and whispered, "You look beautiful, my love." She barely smiled before moving on. The reception was in an elegant hall. I found my assigned table and my chest tightened. Table 8, at the back near the kitchen. So far from the head table I could barely see the bride and groom. My table mates were strangers. When an elderly woman asked if I was related to the bride, I told her I was her mother and tried to remain composed. She looked astonished, as was I. I watched Grace celebrate with friends, hugging Theodore's mother with an intimacy I hadn't felt in years. Every gesture felt like a small wound. Dinner arrived late at our table and was lukewarm. The chicken disappointed and the wine did nothing to ease the bitterness. Through the meal I kept waiting for Grace to come over, to include me. She was busy. I felt invisible at the most important day of her life. When the toasts began, my hope rose. Perhaps she would mention me. Theodore spoke first, thanking parents, friends, and colleagues, and spoke of the family he wanted to build with Grace. Then Grace stood. She was flushed with champagne and emotion. She lifted her glass. "I've learned family isn't always those who share your blood," she began. "My chosen family are the people who make me happy." Her words landed like stones. Each sentence felt like a rejection. She raised her glass, and the room applauded. I clung to a last hope that a mention of me would come at the end of her speech. Then she looked directly at me, with contempt. "There are people who don't deserve to be part of this moment," she said, fixing her eyes on me. The room fell still. Everyone knew who she meant. "Mom," she said finally, "you can leave." Silence. 200 faces turned toward me. Shame burned my cheeks. I laid my napkin on the table with trembling hands. My carefully ironed dress felt like a costume. I stood slowly, clinging to what dignity I had left. To my surprise, Theodore rose too. His face, previously joyful, had hardened with resolve. "What are you doing?" Grace whispered, tugging his arm. He pulled free and walked to the microphone. "Before your mother leaves, there are a few things everyone should know," he said. My legs shook. Guests watched as if witnessing a spectacle. "When we started dating 3 years ago, Grace told me her mother was bitter and controlling." Theodore continued. "She said Amelia was a burden, someone better kept at a distance. I believed her. But a month ago, I decided to find out the truth." Grace tried to stop him. He persisted. Victoria, my sister, had spoken to him, and what she revealed changed everything. He told the room that I had been widowed when Grace was 12, and had worked relentlessly to raise her alone, cleaning, waiting tables, selling possessions, even my wedding ring so Grace could study. I had worked nights and days so my daughter wouldn't lack. When Grace fell ill in university, I went into debt for private care and stayed awake for 3 days to tend to her. I had refused other marriages so I could put Grace first. Each detail was another blow to my daughter. I held my hands to my chest, breathless. Theodore said he couldn't marry someone who treated her mother with contempt. He described how Grace had moved away after graduating, rarely visiting, ignoring calls, and even rejecting the money I had sent during her early post-university years. 3 visits in 3 years, he said. And every time Grace's mother called, she was rejected. Grace's makeup ran as shame and guilt washed over her. People murmured. Theodore kept going and recounted the pictures on my wall, the albums of Grace's life, the sacrifices I made so she could succeed. "When I proposed to you, Grace," Theodore said, turning to his bride, "you told me your mother didn't deserve to be at our wedding. You said she would bring trouble. I insisted on inviting her, and you placed her at the worst table in the hall. Tonight you publicly humiliated her in your speech. I cannot marry someone who treats her mother like this." The hall was a study in silence. Some pulled out phones. Others watched in stunned silence. Grace fell to her knees, sobbing and begging for him to stay. Theodore removed his wedding ring and placed it on the main table. He stepped toward me, took my hands, and spoke softly. "Mrs. Amelia, I am so sorry you had to endure this. You don't deserve this. You deserve to be seen for what you are, the bravest, most generous woman I've met." His words trembled through me. Then, addressing everyone, he said he could not go through with the wedding. This was met by shocked commotion. I began to walk out. Each footstep echoed. The whispers followed me, but for the first time in years I felt seen. Victoria called as I sat on a garden bench. Theodore had phoned her and told her what had happened. "Feel proud," Victoria told me. "For the first time in years someone defended your honor. Your daughter received the most important lesson of her life. Hopefully she learns it." As people started to leave the hall, I sat in the cool night air and finally breathed. Sometimes the truth needs a voice. Sometimes the courage of a stranger, or a soon-to-be son, can reveal what years of silence could not. That night I left with my dignity and unexpectedly with the recognition I had longed for. Guests hurried to their cars, faces tight with disbelief. Some of Grace's friends slipped away, clearly uncomfortable. I held Victoria's call with a trembling heart. "Victoria, I don't know what comes next. How do I move on?" I asked. "You're coming to my house tonight," she said. "We'll talk. We'll cry if we must. Tomorrow we'll start planning your new life. A life where you won't beg for your daughter's love, where you're appreciated for who you truly are." As I ended the call, I saw Grace leaving the hall. Her dress was creased, her makeup smeared, each step looked painful. She ran toward me and fell to her knees. "Mom, forgive me," she pleaded. "I was wrong. I was terrible to you." I looked at the woman before me, my daughter, the child I had rocked and cared for, the person for whom I had given so much. But she was also the woman who had just humiliated me publicly and had spoken poorly of me for years. Grace, I said, steady but firm, do you know how many times over these 3 years I picked up the phone just to hear your voice? She sobbed and nodded. Every day, I stayed awake wondering where I went wrong. You never stopped being a good mother, I replied. You were the one who was a terrible daughter, she cried, confessional and stunned. Theodore left me. I lost the love of my life because of what I did. No, Grace, I corrected. You lost him because of the choices you made and how you treated the family that raised you. She begged me, what will I do without Theodore? Without you? I turned toward the street where Victoria was waiting. You will live with the consequences of your actions, I said. Love requires give and take. Maybe you'll learn to be better. But I won't beg for your affection anymore. If you truly want to be my daughter, you know where to find me, and I won't chase you. I climbed into Victoria's car with legs that shook and a heart pounding. Through the rear-view mirror, she watched me with a mix of concern and pride. How are you feeling? She asked as she started the engine. Like I woke from a 3-year nightmare, I answered, wiping tears. On the drive to her house, we were quiet. The city lights blurred by, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel completely lost. Hurt, yes. Devastated by the night's end, certainly. But also strangely free. At Victoria's home, she made chamomile tea, and we sat in companionable silence. Then she said, there's something I didn't tell you about Theodore's call. What is it? I asked. She told me Theodore had been worried for me. He'd noticed something in my eyes that didn't match Grace's description of me. If Amelia were truly the bitter woman Grace painted, how did she raise someone so accomplished? He had asked. That question stayed with him. Hearing that touched me. Theodore had seen qualities in me my daughter refused to acknowledge. Do you think I was a bad mother, Victoria? I asked. She held my hands and answered plainly. You were the best mother a girl could have. You raised Grace alone after Michael died. You worked tirelessly and sacrificed more than most know. So why does she resent me? I asked. I don't think she hates you, Victoria said. She fears you. You represent sacrifice and the life she wanted to escape. Her rejection is more about guilt and the image she feared than about your worth. Her words resonated. Perhaps Grace's rejection was rooted in her own discomfort rather than my failures. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. Mrs. Amelia? A young man said. It's Theodore. I hope it's not a bad time. I felt my heart flutter. No, not at all. He apologized. Not to me personally, but for not finding out the truth sooner and allowing Grace to mistreat me. Then he shared what he had learned. Coworkers and acquaintances confirmed a pattern of disrespect. Grace had been unkind to people in service roles and dismissive of those she considered below her. Those revelations hurt more than the wedding humiliation. When had my sweet child become someone who could look down on others? I'm glad I didn't marry someone who isn't who I thought she was, Theodore said. And you saved yourself from being emotionally abused any further. You deserve better. His words comforted me. He reminded me there were people who saw my worth. That night I stayed at Victoria's and slept peacefully, for the first time in years. At dawn I woke with a quiet sense of calm. Not happiness yet, but relief. Victoria made coffee, and the smell brought back easier times. When my phone began to ring, I declined at first. Grace called repeatedly. Finally, after several attempts, I ignored her. Her messages shifted from apologies to blame, to manipulative threats about harming herself if I didn't help. Victoria read the messages and shook her head. This is emotional manipulation, she said. Exactly what she's done to you for years, only now she's desperate. 3 days later, while Victoria and I organized some things I'd collected from my apartment, there was a knock. Grace stood on the doorstep, disheveled and pleading. Mom, I need to talk. Theodore left me. I lost my job. I can't pay the rent. I need you. I stepped forward. Have you considered how I feel? How your public humiliation affected me? She had not. For years you trained me to put your needs above my own, I told her. No more. If you want a relationship with me, it will be on my terms. You must prove you value me. not just expect me to solve your problems. She asked what I wanted. I set clear boundaries, therapy to understand her behavior, genuine introspection about why she lost Theodore, and a willingness to rebuild our relationship from the ground up slowly and only after she demonstrated real change. She stood at the door expecting my old pattern of immediate forgiveness. This time I didn't give in. 2 weeks later, Theodore called. Could we meet for coffee? I have a proposal. He invited me to a small cafe downtown. He looked different, leaner and thoughtful, but sincere. I've been thinking about you and what you sacrificed, he began. I want you to join me in a project. A community center for older women who've been made invisible by their families. He explained his plans, funding, permits, blueprints, everything except lived experience. He needed someone who'd been through what the center aimed to address. Why me? I asked. Because when you left that reception with dignity, I saw strength. You embody what these women need, resilience and courage. You know how to rebuild. He placed the blueprints on the table, light-filled rooms, craft workshops, support groups, and a small cafe where women could work. I pictured an elderly neighbor struggling with groceries, invisible, and saw myself helping someone like her. I told him I didn't have money to invest. I don't need money, he said. I need your experience and your voice. His offer stirred something in me, hope and purpose. He also warned that Grace had been contacting him, asking to reconcile. Whatever happens with her, he said, you have value beyond being someone's mother. You have a purpose. I looked at the plans and felt a long-buried sense of possibility. When do we start? I asked. 6 months on, I stood before a mirror in my new apartment, preparing for the inauguration of the New Dawn Women's Center, a place for women like me to be seen, heard, and valued. My reflection showed a woman I barely recognized. Victoria had suggested the modern haircut. I wore an emerald dress I'd bought with my first paycheck as the center's coordinator. For the first time in years, my eyes shone with something I thought I'd lost: purpose. The center had grown faster than we expected. In 3 months, we'd helped 42 women find employment, 26 completed trade workshops, 15 formed a support group that became inseparable. The greatest reward was watching each woman reclaim something she'd thought gone forever: her dignity. Ready for the big day? Victoria asked as she walked in. She'd been my right hand, managing the administrative tasks that felt foreign to me. More than ready, I said, feeling the excitement of something I hadn't felt in decades. I had discovered new skills: event organization, listening deeply, and surprisingly fundraising. Theodore told me I inspired people. I was beginning to believe him. On the way to the center, my phone rang. An unknown number. Mrs. Amelia, I'm Emily from Inspiring Women. We'd like to interview you. Your story went viral. I was stunned. Victoria grabbed the phone and set the interview for the next week. You're going to be on TV, she shouted as she drove. I felt equal parts nervous and thrilled. A crowd had gathered: journalists, city officials, program graduates, and neighbors who'd followed our progress. Theodore stood at the entrance in a blue suit, overseeing final details. Mrs. Amelia, he greeted with a broad smile. Ready to see this dream realized? Our dream, I corrected. You helped make it possible. Women shared their stories. Emily, 63, now a pastry chef. Linda, 58, who found healing in the support group after being abandoned. Hope, 72, selling crafts at the center's cafe. When I spoke, I glanced at those faces. Women who looked at me with respect and expectation. For a moment, I tasted the memory of humiliation from Grace's wedding. 200 people watching me with pity and curiosity when she told me to leave. How different it was to be truly seen rather than judged for someone else's choices. 6 months earlier, my daughter had publicly expelled me from her wedding. That night, I thought my life had ended, but I was wrong. I discovered my value didn't hinge on one person's approval. My years raising a daughter alone, surviving widowhood, and working multiple jobs had prepared me to help others. I searched the crowd for Theodore and caught his proud smile. Women wiped their eyes as I spoke. The woman who expelled me did me the greatest favor, I said. She forced me to find my strength, purpose, and chosen family. Applause filled the room. As congratulations and photos wrapped up, I noticed Grace at the back, thinner, with streaks of gray, dressed simply. We exchanged a brief, polite wave. She didn't approach. An hour later, when most guests had left, Grace came forward, hesitant. "Mom," she said softly, "I wanted to congratulate you. This is incredible. I've been following the project. I'm proud of you." "Proud?" I raised an eyebrow. "That's unexpected from someone who once called me bitter and toxic." She lowered her gaze. "I've been in therapy, like you said. I've learned things about myself. I hate. I understand what you sacrificed, and why Theodore left me. I'm trying to be worthy of the love you gave me." This Grace felt humbler, more human than the proud woman I'd known. "I'm glad you're working on yourself," I replied. "But understand this, I no longer need your love to feel whole. I found my path. If you truly change, rebuilding a relationship will take time and real work, more than apologies." She nodded. I watched her walk away, feeling cautious hope rather than pain. Theodore joined me afterward. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Like a free woman," I answered. "Like someone who finally understands her story doesn't end with rejection, but begins when she writes her own ending." That night I closed the center and read the plaque. "New Dawn Women's Center, a place to begin again." At 67 I felt certain my most beautiful story was starting. APPLAUDED. 2 years later, 2 years after the opening, I reviewed statistics that swelled my heart. Over 300 women supported, 2 additional centers opened, and a national foundation inspired by our work. The TV interview led to articles, conference invitations, and a book deal. My book, Never Too Late to Start Over, became a bestseller and helped fund program expansion. But the real reward wasn't headlines or numbers. It was watching broken women become empowered, and receiving letters from mothers who had finally set boundaries with abusive adult children. My pain had helped heal others. One afternoon, preparing for an international conference keynote on active aging, Victoria appeared with a smile. "You have a visitor," she said. I went to the reception and saw Grace waiting, not the desperate woman from the opening, but serene. "Hi, Mom," she said. "I hope this is okay." "Of course. How are you?" "Good. Really good. I've kept going with therapy. It's been hard, but I've faced truths I'd avoided. I'm volunteering at a shelter and learning what it means to serve without expecting anything back. It's transformed me." She spoke with honesty I hadn't heard before. "Seeing what you've built made me realize I missed the chance to know an extraordinary woman, not just as my mother but as a person. I know I don't deserve to be your priority. But could we try to know each other again, as 2 adults, perhaps friends?" I asked about Theodore. "He married last year," she said. "She's a teacher who works with special needs children. I'm happy for him. I learned true love isn't possessive. If I love him, I should want his happiness, even if I'm not part of it. And if I love you, I must respect the life you built without me." She proposed small steps, weekly calls to check in, lunch invitations with no agendas, treating me as an independent, successful woman rather than a problem solver. I reflected on the woman I'd been, defined by motherhood, and the woman I'd become, Amelia, whole on her own. "We can try," I said, "but on one condition. This relationship will be part of my life, not the center of it. I have responsibilities and joys beyond being your mother." She understood. "That frees me to love you without guilt," she said. We sat quietly watching women at the center laugh and work. "Isn't it ironic?" I said. "To be a better mother to you, I first had to stop being just your mother and become my own person, Amelia." Later, Grace called simply to ask how my day had been. We spoke for 20 minutes about projects, travel plans, and friendships. She didn't ask for anything, only to get to know me. For the first time in decades, I felt we might build something new from the ashes of the past.